Good evening. On behalf of IIP technical team, I, Dr. Rutra Mohan, welcome you to this webinar on breast cancer, healing hands with an empathetic mind. We are streaming live on IIP India YouTube page. So to get regular updates about our webinars and other notifications, please follow our YouTube and Facebook pages. If you have any questions to the speaker during the presentation, you can put it in the chat section. These questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being organized by IPWC Aurangabad District of Maharashtra State. The moderators for today's webinar are Dr. Ashwini Kale, Dr. Antara Deshmukh, and Dr. Vaibhavi Valembe. So I request the moderators to please commence with the session.
Thank you, Uttara ma'am. Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Ashwini Kale, District Coordinator of IP Women's Cell for Aurangabad District. We have with us Dr. Vaibhavi Valimbe and Dr. Antara Deshmukh. This for Aurangabad District. We will be your host for today. IIP Women's Cell started on 30th May 2018. It functions of National Head, Dr. Ruchi Vaishni, and IIP President Executive, Dr. Sanjeev Jha. IIP Women's Cell works towards conducting public awareness camps, CMEs, and workshops. It aims at bringing together all physiotherapy professionals and improving public awareness about physiotherapy. We have 5 zones in India with heads for each. Dr. Pooja Kamre is the West Zone head. The state team of IIP Women's Cell Maharashtra includes State Coordinator Dr. Suvarna Ganvir, Joint Coordinator Dr. Snehal Patel, and Sub-Coordinators Dr. Uttara Mohan, Dr. Priya, Dr. Nirali Sangvi. In Maharashtra, IIP Women's Cell has conducted more than 40 plus low-cost activities in various districts. In the first corporate IIP conference held in Indore in April 2019, Maharashtra State received award for Best State IIP. We shall now proceed for today's session. I would like to introduce our honorable speaker for today, Dr. Renu Patan Shetty. She is presently working as a professor and head of Department of Oncology Physiotherapy, Kahir Institute of Physiotherapy, KLE University. Ma'am has been in academics since 2005. She has worked as assistant in KLE University. She has many international and national awards to her name, of which are few. International Scientist Award as Best Woman Researcher Award at Chennai. International Education Award as Top 10 Professor Award. National Award for Literacy and Healthcare. Excellence in Physiotherapy Award. Indian Health Professional Award, Physiotherapy. She is in process of developing a new software app for development and assessment of cognitive function and its validation in normal population. Phase 1 study. Adding to her highly impressive resume are more than 30 publications cited in Google Scholar and PubMed. I welcome you, ma'am. We all are very eager to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Ashwini, for that wonderful introduction. I'm really thankful to the Maharashtra IIP team and the Aurangabad district team and all the panelists sitting and inviting me for this talk on this webinar series of IIP. It's a very good move during this COVID situation to keep everyone informed and educated and continuing the education process. Thank you once again. I would like to share the screen, which is...
Yes, you can share. Screen share is active.
I don't know, there's some problem with the video, the share.
Can you try clicking again for the screen share?
I have clicked. Yes.
The screen share is getting turned on, but we are able to see only a white screen.
Yes. Can you see it now?
No.
Uh-huh. Just one second. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes. So welcome again. Yes. I have very aptly designed the title dealing with breast cancer, healing hands. As we all know, physiotherapies are called as healing hands. But in case of breast cancer, we need empathetic minds too. We need to stand in patient's shoes and think what pains or what disabilities the patient is undergoing. So this is a very common question which is asked by the patients, the caregivers, as well as some of the oncologists who are not very well aware of the physiotherapy options in oncology physiotherapy, basically in breast cancer. So the very commonly question asked, is physiotherapy useful to a breast cancer patient? And all the time and each time, yes, I answer, it is indeed. And it is worthwhile even if we start even after 6 months of whatever procedure or the cancer treatment goes on with a breast cancer patient. So to say it in one line, there is no rationale to postpone the start. And so that is how we begin at any time. I have very choicely divided my presentation into 3 parts. One is the facts, what we need to know about breast cancer, why breast cancer and physiotherapists, why we need to deal with them. The second part would be why, what are the common problems in a breast cancer patient and how do we deal with them? And the third is what are the no's, what are the do's and don'ts we need to keep in mind when we are dealing with them. Now coming to the facts, this breast cancer is the most common type of cancer in women, which accounts for 14% of the cancer in Indian women. If you go to the detailed statistics, every 4 minutes, an Indian woman is diagnosed with breast cancer. That is really worrisome. 1 woman dies of breast cancer every 13 minutes in India. This is even worse than COVID situation at present. A 2018 report of breast cancer statistics recorded more than 1 lakh new registered cases and more than 87,000 reported deaths, which suggests that more than 50% of deaths are occurring when it is diagnosed and then it is treated. More than 50% of the Indian women suffer from stage 3 and 4. So by the time a lady comes to an oncologist, a surgical oncologist, she's already in stage 3 and 4, which is again worrisome to us. Post-cancer survival for women with breast cancer was reported 60% in Indian women as compared to 80% in US. So again, the 60% in Indian women and 80% in US, you see a 20% difference there. That is because the survival rate is very poor in India because of breast cancer. And the very reason for this is because there is lack of awareness, there is lack of screening procedures, and of course, our insurance doesn't cover this. An estimated 70,000 women, more than 70,000 women, have died of breast cancer in India in year 2012, which records the highest in the world for that year. Again, a fact to worry about. Now, we all are carrying the awareness programs, the prevention programs at our own cities. So let's take a look at which all cities are really at risk. The cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Bhopal, Kolkata, Chennai, Ahmedabad, these places have account for 25 to 32% of all the female cancers, which are more than 1/4 of all the female cancers, including cervix cancer and other gynecological cancers, colorectal cancers, etc. One more very worrisome account is it's more common in the younger age group. Almost 50% of the cases which are there, which have been recorded, are seen in 25 to 50 years of age. And more than 70% of the cases present in advanced stage, which has very poor survival and high mortality. More than 50% of the breast cancer patients in India are suffering from stage 3 and 4, where the survival chances are again low. I have repeatedly written this so that it raises an alarm in our minds so that we as physiotherapists can act on prevention, such as screening and awareness programs in your own cities. Now, just a brief rush through the breast cancer risk factors. We all know, but these guidelines are given by ACOG guidelines. A person who has a family history of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, hereditary breast and ovarian syndromes, gene mutations, BRCA1 and BRCA2, the specific pathologies in the breast biopsy, early menarche, late menopause, nulliparity, prolonged interval between menarche and first pregnancy, menopausal hormonal therapy, ladies who are not breastfeeding, post-pregnancy, increasing age, some ethnicities where India is not there, but still we are at risk nowadays. Asians, if you put that into the connotations. Higher body mass index, alcohol consumption, smoking, dense breasts on mammography, obesity, prior exposure to high dose therapeutic chest radiation in young women. So these guidelines are given by ACOG guidelines. And if you take a history of a breast cancer in Indian women, sometimes none of these are there, but still they are diagnosed with breast cancer, which is again for us to think why. Now coming to some of the diagnostic steps, I'm not going to speak on detail about the diagnostic steps. It's just an overview, which we all as physiotherapists should know. Now this is a very commonly routinely done in our hospitals, a needle biopsy, where it is used to draw sample fluid or a tissue for a lump and send for an histopathological study so that they can do a staging. A mammogram, which is a very common screening procedure, which should be done after the age of 30 and annually done post 30, and especially after the age of 40. Let us see what the American College of Obs and American Cancer Society recommends, which is very important for every one of us as well. There are 4 or 5 sections in that: clinical breast examination, mammography initiation age, mammography screening interval, and mammography stop age. Now, if you see the ACOG guidelines, it is offered every 1 to 3 years for women aged 25 to 39 years annually. But American Cancer Society doesn't recommend that. It's okay. But mammography initiation age, it often starts at the age of 40 years. And between 40 to 49 years, there is counseling if the patient wants, and recommendation by not later than age 50 years if the patient has not initiated. Now again, the American Cancer Society also gives the same. Now why this is important here is we need to spread this awareness at least for a lady who has reached or who is going to reach a menopause age of 40 years. We need to tell her to get a mammography done at least annually. Then, of course, the intervals, we can keep it as annual or biennial. And the mammography stoppage, it can continue up till the age of 75 years, usually not recommended by both the societies. So our critical age lies between 40 to 50 years. If you are working with women, if you're working on women physiotherapy, please recommend mammography initiation at the age of, from the age of 40 to 50 years. Now, this is a wonderful table which is given by the ACOG. Again, mammography screening and the correlation between the mammography screening and the breast cancer specific mortality reduction group. Now you can see how it reduces by the age of 70 to 74 and how high it is at the age of 39 to 49. Next, diagnostic procedures, ultrasound, which is not very routinely done, but still can be done. PET scan, usually done for METs. If there is a metastasis, we still prefer a PET scan. It can be used as a diagnostic scan as well. MRI. Self-breast examination is one important thing which we need to learn and teach to our interns, postgraduates, and we ourselves need to do it as well so as to teach to the people. We have in our area in Belgaum, we have almost recorded about 5 to 6 colleges, universities, including the class 4 workers, to the engineering students, to the college students, and to the ladies. And though we have not got positive results, but we have taught them how to do and come and report to us. So manual breast examination is very important, which can be done in these ways. Ask the lady to lie down. It can be done standing in front of the mirror, going up and down this way, going to the circular motions at all the angles, and then to the circular. Now, this is to be done with your dominant hand, with your fingertips, gently probing each breast in one of these or all these 3 patterns. Self-breast examination is usually done in 4 positions if the patient is standing. One is hands down, standing with no clothes in front of a mirror, stand bare in front of a mirror. Show your hands in front of the mirror, keep your hands in front of the mirror. Second is take your arms up as shown in the picture. Third is take your arms on the waist, and see if there is a difference in size, shape, redness, or any other lumps or changes that you can see, and immediately come and report it to the oncologist or any nearby physician. This is one more examination of the nipple. This is about the breast. This is about the nipple. Ask the lady to squeeze the nipple. If we are doing, we do it. If you are teaching them to do, then you have to ask them to do. Squeeze the nipples to check for the discharge, for a bloody discharge, for any other liquid discharge as well, if the lady is not lactating. The common options, treatment options in breast cancer, very commonly done in India, 5 standard breast cancer treatment options. 2 are local and 3 are systemic. Local problems can be handled effectively by a physical therapist. The problems which arise from surgery or radiation therapy. However, the hormone therapy, the chemotherapy, and the targeted therapy, systemic. These are the systemic cancer treatment options, which definitely affects some of the systems like nervous system, the GI system, and most of it is about the GI system, of course, the cognitive function also. So these are the surgical options which we commonly come across, the radiation, which we come across the radiation fibrosis, we come across CIPN, which is there when they give a chemotherapy treatment. This is a beautiful table which explains the ICF classification of function, disability, and health model in breast cancer patients. You can see the table, which shows the surgery, radiation, and the systemic therapy, and the problems which arise in body structure, functions, impairments related to the acute and late complications. You can see the number of conditions over here, like swelling, fibrosis, pain, loss of range of motion, postural changes, lymphedema, nerve injury, sensory changes, and I can go on, where we can play a lot many roles. We can play a real good role in getting them back to their near normal routine life and getting them back and improving the quality of life. Remember one thing, when we are dealing with breast cancer patients, we are not getting them to the earlier stage because the cancer has already affected the part. We are trying to improve the quality of life by dealing with all these problems. So your aim is to improve the quality of life. The life after a breast cancer treatment, how to help your patients survive. We call them survivors. Some people call them thrivers. So remember to tell them that they need to forget their old life and start a new life with a smile on their faces. Now we have very commonly used term survivor, cancer survivors. We have seen them in the articles, in the presentations. Now what is this survivorship about? It is the process of living with, through, and beyond cancer. That means living with the cancer, you have been through the treatment through the cancer, like chemotherapy, radiation therapy, surgery. And then once the treatment is over, you are still with the cancer because you do not know when it can metastasize. It begins at the diagnosis. It includes the ongoing active treatment to reduce the recurrence or treat the metastatic disease. Co-survivors are those who include the family members, the friends of the cancer survivor, and the caregivers also are considered as co-survivors. Remember one thing, the survivorship, you cannot generalize the survivorship and is unique for each person. When we are dealing with a cancer patient or a breast cancer patient, let us know at what phase is the patient in. Is it the acute survivorship, the extended survivorship, or the permanent survivorship? Now, to know this, you should know what is acute survivorship. It's a diagnosis to the end of the active treatment. It can be a surgery, it can be a radiation therapy, it can be a chemotherapy or a targeted therapy. Extended survivorship ends at the initial treatment, which is more than first months or first few years. The permanent survivorship focuses on the long-term effects of the cancer and the cancer treatment, which can include a metastatic patient, the disease, and of course, the palliative care. The people who are working in the palliative care, remember, you are working in a permanent survivorship. So you are just looking at the symptoms and you are treating symptomatically. If you are working in acute survivorship, definitely there's a lot of hope. Extended survivorship, again, a lot of hope for the patient to come back to near normal and improve quality of life. Now, what are the standards for survivorship care? So as a physical therapist, you and me, in what is our focus when we are doing a survivorship care? When we are called to take care of the patient, which are the different areas where we can focus on? And it's a very large area. Remember, it's not only treating a patient in the acute care. You are working on so many different aspects, like physical symptoms and conditions. It can be a psychosocial concern, how to teach the patient to come back and mingle in the community. It can be quality of life, how you can improve the quality of life of a patient. It can be a behavioral therapy, health behaviors. Cognitive therapy plays a very important role here. Disease progression, recurrence and survival, palliative care comes into picture over here. Research is a big platform for us in India because compared to the Western counterparts, we have very less research papers. If you try to compare the research done in India, and of course the quality of the research is also, I will not say low, but not up to the mark of the Western counterpart. So if we try to make a good research protocol and do a good clinical trial, probably we can do much better. Then special populations like geriatrics, pediatrics, women, and of course the palliative patients. Policies where we can make in the hospital, insurance, which which plays a very important role in the economic impact of the cancer. If you compare the US to India, US, it spends a lot of money on the cancer patients, whereas in India, it's an economic burden. Patterns and quality of care again. So these are some of the various roles where we can play. You can choose where you want to play and excel in that. Now, what are the stakeholders? What we talk of a team. So definitely patient and family stands topmost. Then the oncology surgeons, physicians, radiation oncologists, therapists. We have occupational therapists, physical therapists, we have swallowing therapists. So many therapists playing a role there. Oncology nurses, if the patient is in the hospital. A psychosocial report, we need a help of a social worker who can communicate with the patient and help him or her for a social upliftment. Of course, pharmacy, the research staff, palliative care people, genetic people, nutrition, and so many others can play a role as and when required. But the first 5 are very important, and they are till patient is there living. Now, this is the second part. I finished with the first part of the cancer, the breast cancer, that is why we should do and what are the different stages of the cancer survivorship. Now, coming to the common problems in breast cancer patients. I have focused on very important problems which are very common, which are very commonly seen in the clinical scenario, which we have dealt with in my at least 4 to 5 years of experience in the department. What I've seen, the first is the cancer pain, second shoulder dysfunction, we have breathing dysfunction, cancer cachexia, cancer-related fatigue, osteoporosis, lymphedema, axillary Webb syndrome. This doesn't mean that patient doesn't have other problems. I have not included mental problems. I have not included anxiety and depression because we need to work those problems with the psychiatrists and the psychologists. Now, coming to cancer pain. Remember, cancer-related pain can occur in all stages of cancer survivorship. What we need to understand over here is to differentiate the psychological pain versus the pathological pain. If it is a psychological pain which the patient is not able to really point out, probably that is a psychological pain which we need to work it out with the psychiatrist and the psychologist and give a cognitive behavioral therapy if you are trained in that. But if it's a pathological pain, which most of us get when in the acute state of survivorship, when the patient is in the hospital, where there is pain in the shoulder, where there is pain on the chest, where it has been operated, where there's pain in the neck, definitely we can treat. So a detailed assessment is very important. Now, which are the commonest devices which we can use while controlling or treating pain? TENS, 2-channel, 4-channel, high TENS, low TENS have been very commonly experimented, and we have documented evidences. We have documented evidences suggesting TENS is a very good option in all phases of survivorship. There are patients who have even bought them also and kept with them to control their pain. And if it is given in conjunction with the painkillers, it is still better. But then you cannot give painkillers for a long time. So TENS is always a better option. Interferential currents have also been given. We have given it in our center and it has shown good results. Cold lasers, we have worked with cold lasers, not for pain, but pain arising due to some other morbidity like decubitus ulcers, and it has really helped healing the decubitus ulcers and hence reduce the pain. Hot and cold, what we called as cold packs and hot packs are to be used with caution in cancer patients. Let it be a breast cancer, prostate cancer, or any other cancer. Remember, if the patient is undergoing a chemotherapy and it is more than 5 to 6 sessions, definitely there would be some sensory issues with those patients, whether in the upper limb or in the lower limb to begin with, in the periphery. And the longer the nerves, the more is the pain and more is the injury. So when you are working with hot and cold packs, please do a detailed assessment of sensory system before you give it, because once the injury has occurred, especially when a patient is undergoing a chemotherapy, the skin is very fragile. Probably the patient has lost sensations as well temporarily. So when you are dealing with this, you can cause an injury rather than treating it. So be very careful. Shoulder dysfunction. This is a very common problem. And remember, when you're doing an assessment of a shoulder dysfunction, there are 4 types of pain which you can come across. One is arising from a musculoskeletal nociceptive type of a pain, which is very common with the shoulder, the side where it has been affected, or it has been operated, or where a biopsy has been done, or where a radiation has been done. Then drug-induced neuropathic pain. This is where the drug has been given, and this can have a neuropathic type of a pain where a patient tells that he or she, sometimes it is he also, there is 5% chances that even a male can get a breast cancer. We have seen one patient at our center where he had breast cancer. So remember, breast cancer is not always women. It can be in the entire world. 5% is about men suffering from breast cancer as well. It can be radiation-induced pain, again, very common in patients who are undergoing radiotherapy. Chronic persistent pain. Now, this has to be clearly distinguished whether it is because of chronic fatigue, whether it is psychological, or whether it is because of the frozen shoulder, or whether because the patient is bedridden. So your assessment is very important over here, distinguishing whether it is musculoskeletal, whether it is drug-induced, whether it is radiation-induced, whether it is chronic persistent pain. So your history taking becomes very important besides the other physical assessment. Now, what are the different options you can get? I am not telling you here on this platform to do or give this exercises, use these modalities only, and that is the best. No, each patient comes to you is in a different way. He presents herself, she presents herself in a different manner. Your treatment options has to be tailor-made. So how you're going to deal best depends on what. I am just giving you an option that this, and this can be given. Now, exercises can bring significant clinical improvement in shoulder joint in women with breast cancer. What type of exercises? In acute phase, kindly start with mild active range of motion exercises along with flexibility. Multi-factor physiotherapy, which includes again stretching and exercises. Active exercises are always better than passive exercises. Now, this is for 2 reasons. One, to reduce the post-operative pain. Second is to improve the lymphedema channels draining into the upper part. Third is myofascial induction reduces the intensity of pain. So a lot of manual therapy has been started. We are giving it in our center also. Earlier, there were textbooks, there was literature telling that manual therapy is a red flag. Do not give, it can give rise to metastasis. But we have found out, of course, we have not done a molecular study, but the quality of the life and the activity part of the the shoulder improves with manual therapy. So we have given it a lot of patients, both cervical range of motion and shoulder motion as well, and it has really improved with especially the myofascial techniques and PRT, position release technique. I hope I'm audible. Hello.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yeah, thank you. Neuromuscular taping, neuromuscular, facilitation. Neuromuscular taping is also a very well taken technique in Western countries. We have tried to give 1 or 2 patients neuromuscular taping. They did not like it because they are not very happy with the tape. One. Then the postural exercises, which can improve the postural, which can open the chest, and patient's pulmonary reserve can be improved. Incentive spirometry to be used. Incentive spirometry can be used in all stages of cancer survivorship because it gives you a visual feedback. Patient can tell that patient is not able to do beyond this. Now, breath control techniques are good way of mindfulness exercises. Yogic breathing like pranayama also induces a sort of calming situation in the mind, relaxed positioning, relaxation exercises, and guided imagery. We have done a small clinical trial in guided imagery in cancer patients, and it has given us good results along with a psychiatrist. Now, this is what is a Haller's index. It is calculated by dividing the transverse diameter of the chest by the AP diameter distance on the CT of the chest. And it can be done by a plain radiographic film as well. And these are the following values which are used in normal chest. We have less. I don't know. I don't know whether I put there on my slide or no. I can share this later. But severe excavatum is more than 3.51. So if there is a severe excavatum, then the corrective surgery is done. But this is usually not done in breast cancer patients because you have a very mild excavatum, especially in geriatric patients. So they don't go in for a corrective surgery. Coming to the next slide, is it displayed? The next slide, cancer. Yes, coming to cancer cachexia. Can everybody see the cancer cachexia slide? Can you see the display of the cancer cachexia?
Yes.
Okay, coming to cancer cachexia, this is also one of the very commonest problems in any cancer patient, especially in a breast cancer patient, if patient is undergoing chemotherapy. It's a complex metabolic wasting syndrome, which is characterized by an unintentional loss of skeletal muscle mass. Remember, this is with or without the fat loss, which cannot be reversed. Underline that cancer cachexia is a condition, is a syndrome which cannot be reversed by standard nutritional treatment, unlike others, and leads to a progressive functional impairment, accounting for 20 to 40% of the deaths due to cancer. Now, how does the progression of cancer cachexia go? It has been explained by a pre-cachexia stage, a cachexia stage, and a refractory cachexia stage which cannot be reversed. To the next slide, if you go, I have a beautiful chart which shows the cachexic journey of a patient of cancer. So you have 3 stages there: pre-cachexia, cachexia syndrome, and severe cachexia. If you see there, the weight loss in pre-cachexia is just more than 6 to 9 months. The cachexia syndrome is 3 to 9 months, where there is weight loss, there is reduced food intake and systemic inflammation. And severe cachexia is severe muscle wasting, fat loss, and immunocompromise. Now, why I have put this stage is not to know what whether it is pre-cachexia, just begun, or the patient has already taken a chemotherapy and patient is undergoing that, cachexia syndrome showing up, cachexia syndrome-like symptoms where there is weight loss, there is reduced food intake, patient is drastically showing that it is about 3 to 5 kgs the patient has lost, or severe cachexia where all the bones are showing up and patient is not able to even get up. So at a severe cachexia stage, patient is almost reaching very near to death. So we cannot do much there. What we can do is our roles is in pre-cachexia and the cachexia syndrome stage. Now, this is what happens when a patient is in a cachectic environment. What happens is when patient loses the muscle mass, there is inflammation, there is anemia. Now, what happens? The pro-inflammatory cytokines are increased. The hemoglobin is reduced. That is why the patient is not able to perform the exercises or any activity what you tell him because of the severe muscle weakness and the muscle fatigue. And then hypergonadism, where there is reduced sex hormones, there is which is again interrelated to the muscle mass decrease and the bone mineral density. Now see the wonderful change when you give a patient an activity-based exercise where you tell her to do an aerobic exercise, which is complemented with a resistance exercise, what happens is that there is a decrease in the pro-inflammatory cytokines. This has been proved beyond doubt. Anemia, which is shown to improve the hemoglobin levels, and there is definitely improvement in the BMD, bone mineral density. So remember, if you are working in a pre-cachexia or in a cachexia, now the next slide shows, I'm on slide number 32, where it shows the potential skeletal muscle adaptations to exercise training during cancer cachexia. This is given by ACSM, where you can see the various muscle property, the mass, the myofibers, sectional area, the strength, and the protein synthesis, breakdown, and the oxidative capacity. See what has happened in the cancer cachexia stage, where it is all decreased. And suddenly when you give, there is training adaptation, it is showing an increase. So this is how there is an improvement at the macro level as well as the microcellular level. Now, these are the common ACSM guidelines for all cancer patients: 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity, then complementing resistance exercises to aerobic exercises has always shown good results, and complemented along with the flexibility. Now, this can interchange a little with the intensity. You can start with low level intensity and then increase it to high level intensity, depending on which stage the patient is. This is the next problem, again very common, cancer-related fatigue. So cancer-related fatigue has been operationally defined as a persistent subjective sense of tiredness related to cancer or cancer treatment. This is the main difference between fatigue normally and cancer-related fatigue. If it doesn't have a history of cancer or a cancer-related treatment, you can probably differentiate it from a cancer-related fatigue. It also can be a sequelae of the malignancy itself, which is caused by multimodal cancer treatment or a secondary treatment, which is related to anemia. So two reasons: one is the cancer-related treatment and the another reason is anemia. Now, the next slide, which I'm displaying on slide number 35. Now you can see the various causes of cancer-related fatigue. I just told you two, which is one, and the other is the malignancy. The pain, anemia, the activity level, the comorbid status of the patient, the nutritional status of the patient, the sleep patterns of the patient, and the emotional component. All this can lead to cancer-related fatigue. So why I'm telling you this is, when you are taking a history of cancer-related fatigue of a patient, you need to know what is really giving cancer-related fatigue. It can be 2 or 3 combinations, it can be all, it can be just one. So knowing if pain is giving cancer-related fatigue, you can definitely play a role. If anemia, then you'll have to work it with the medication. If it is activity level, again with the medication. If it's a you need to know what is giving rise to cancer-related fatigue and then work on the treatment options. Now, this is a very, if you go to the next slide, number 36, you see the fatigue scale there. It is a very beautiful fatigue scale where 0 is no fatigue and then the worst fatigue. You just display this fatigue scale to the patient and tell where you are, and then you know from which level you have to work. What are the various, again, different options for cancer-related fatigue? Aerobic exercises have shown to improve the cardiopulmonary reserve, which can reduce the fatigue levels. Pilates exercises, low intensity, low level Pilates has shown to improve yes, it has shown. Guided imagery techniques have also shown where it is a part of cognitive therapy. So you can use a combination of these exercises. You can do one, you can do a combination. See what is best for patient. Coming to the next problem is osteoporosis. Again, I've divided it into premenopausal women and postmenopausal women. Now, what happens in a premenopausal woman? On an average, the menopause onset is 10 years earlier than normal in women receiving chemotherapy. Now, underlining that 10 years earlier is very important for us because the bone mineral density starts decreasing from then onwards. Increasing risk of ovarian failure, where there is high risk for bone loss. And remember, tamoxifen can lead to a bone loss in menopausal women who continue to menstruate after an adjuvant therapy. So that is one thing where we need to take a call on and take a chemotherapy history if the patient is on tamoxifen. Second is menopausal status as well as the cancer. The drug that protects the bone due to being a weak agonist at the estrogen receptor, especially when compared to the aromatase inhibitors. Remember, aromatase inhibitors are the ones which lead to osteoporosis, cancer-related osteoporosis. Now, which are safe and good exercises? These are the beautiful 4 exercise combinations which you can give for any osteoporotic woman, especially with cancer. First, prescribe any exercises which are weight bearing in nature. So standing exercises are always good. Second, combine it with a strength training exercise. You can use a TheraBand to begin with and then low intensity weight exercises. Stability and balance exercises are very useful. Why? Because sometimes a chemotherapy induced peripheral neurotherapy can give rise to balance problems. So stability and balance exercises also should be given in combination with the weight bearing and the strength training, and not to forget the flexibility exercises. Definitely how you would use them, when you would use them, at what stages you would use them. You have to use the FITS principle at whatever stage of survivorship you are working on. Second last problem, lymphedema. Very common problem, but I put it at the end. Lymphedema is defined as an excessive persistent accumulation of fluid and extravascular proteins in the tissue spaces due to the inefficiency of the lymphatic system. The extent of the axillary surgery, obesity, recurrence of the cancer in axillary lymph nodes, and radiotherapy are some of the very common problems. So if it is just an MRM, mastectomy, modified radical mastectomy, you would not expect lymphedema at a level where we can treat. But if it is an axillary node dissection along with MRM or an axillary surgery, definitely lymphedema, patient would suffer from lymphedema after 3 months to 6 months. It doesn't occur suddenly. It doesn't occur at least in 1 month. Later stages at 3 months to 6 months, yes, you can see lymphedema. What are the signs? Patient, you need to tell the patient once the patient is admitted, you are treated, and you have to tell the signs when the patient can make a note of it and come to you. So there can be an increased limb diameter. There can be skin tensioning or tightening with the risk of breakdown. There can be risk of infection, stiffness, decrease in the range of movement of the affected limb. There can be sensory disorders. Sometimes you have a carpal tunnel syndrome like symptoms and reduced limb functional tasks. So these are some of the very common signs which we tell the patient, whenever you are getting these signs, kindly come to us immediately, because it is only at stage 1 and 2 where we play a role. Once the patient reaches stage 3 and stage 4 of lymphedema, it's very difficult to combat lymphedema. Remember, significantly reduced after the first week treatment. Treatment should be continued to achieve the earlier reduction. Whatever treatment you are giving at an acute stage in the hospital has to be continued to achieve it. If you leave that, patient is definitely going to come back to you after 6 months with lymphedema, which can be treatable or not treatable. At all stages of lymphedema or axillary surgery, if they undergo, you need to advise care. Slide number 40, if you can see the stage 0, which is latent, stage 1, which is reversible, stage 2, which is irreversible, and definitely stage 3. Sometimes there is a combination of stage 1 and 2. There can be an intermediate changes between 0 and 1. You need to understand where the patient is at which stage and what is your role. Definitely stage 0, stage 1, and stage 2. You can play a role. You can prevent edema or you can treat edema. Once the patient is in the late stage 2, then probably it becomes difficult because it is a hardened edema, it is a fibrosed edema, and once the tissues get fibrosed, it is difficult to manage the lymph edema. Now, what are the treatment options? This is what I have quoted there is a beautiful complex decongestive therapy. Manual decongestive, it's known as complex decongestive therapy, it's known as manual decongestive therapy, it's known as manual techniques. There are various techniques where you manually drain the lymph, the lymphatic, the edema to the lymphatic channels from the distal to the proximal to the next viable lymph node. Remember one thing, when you're working on lymph edema, you know where uh, the operation has been done, the nodes have been removed. You cannot drain the lymph edema to that area. You have to go beyond that to the next viable lymph node. Only then it can be controlled. Second one is the pneumatic compression therapy, which is very routinely used both for the upper limb. There is a lot of literature on that. However, we are not using it in our clinical setup because of the sensitivity issues of the skin of the patient. If the patient is undergoing chemotherapy, you never know. So laser therapy is also, a lot of literature is there, but we are using the decongestive therapy, the pneumatic compression therapy, and 2-layered and 4-layered bandaging therapies. Now, how you can use a multimodal physiotherapy approach to control edema or to treat edema? One is to place the limb in the elevation position in the acute stage, give lot of upper limb exercises, which is above the heart level, therapeutic massage, where effleurage plays an important role, a compression therapy, definitely a diet therapy with medium chain triglycerides. They are low in cholesterol, so definitely it helps to control the edema. So if you have a combination of this, definitely edema will be controlled, provided it is at 0, 1, or 2, early 2 stages of lymph edema. Axillary web syndrome, very commonly seen in breast cancer, especially if there is an axillary surgery done. Not all breast cancer surgeries are present with axillary web syndrome. It is the axillary lymph node dissection or the axillary surgery where we can see an axillary web syndrome, very commonly seen in our clinical setup. This occurs between 1 and 1st to 5 weeks of axillary node dissection. So we have not seen it in the first week. Usually occurs at 3rd and 5th week when patient starts complaining of tightness or pain in the shoulders. I call it axillary web syndrome because the range of motion is decreased. There can be an edema, there can be a cord-like structure. It is also named as cording. It is also called as axillary strings. It is also called as vascular strings. Vascular strings, why it is called? Because at that area, probably some of the Yes, it is a very visible web of axillary skin overlying are palpable cords of the tissue that are made very taut and painful by the shoulder abduction. So the patient will come to you with a complaint of unable to raise the shoulder, of course with tightness in the axillary area, pain in the axillary area. This also explains the theory of lymphovenous injury and stasis. Now what happens in this area is the lymphatic nodes are removed, so there is a lymphatic stasis. Along with the lymphatic stasis, the small venous channels also get entangled in the fibrous tissue in that area. The area is very small, the area is very limited, but once the lymph and the venous both get entangled in that fibrous tissue, definitely there is going. What are the treatment options for axillary web syndrome? This is very simple. Patient can come with decrease in the range of motion. Patient can come with pain. Patient can come with redness in that area. Patient can come with lymphedema. No, it depends. Your treatment will depend on the impairment-based approach. So whether it is structural, whether it is functional, what it is. So it can, when you palpate and see the structure, it will give you a feel of give or a pop. When you feel the structure under your hand or under your skin, it can give you a feel of give so that you can easily slide, or it gives you a feel of pop. Now, depending on this feeling or the palpable feel, you decide the technique, what you want to do, whether you want to do a manual technique, you select which technique, and the direction and the depth of the treatment. Now remember, all the direction, if you're using an MRF, if you are using a myofascial release technique, then it has to be in the direction of the fibrous tissue, and then the depth, and then the depth of the tissue. It's a very thin cord, so you don't need to go very deep, except if you want to drain. But if you want to really break the tissue, then you need to go with the direction and a mild depth of the tissue. Longitudinal tissue stretches and mobilizations till tolerance levels are always tried, and it has really helped most of the patients who come with axillary web syndrome. I have finished with most of the common problems like cancer pain, cancer-induced cachexia, cancer-induced fatigue, osteoporosis, axillary web syndrome. Now, I'm coming to the last part of my talk. That's the first part, why we should do the problems. The second part, the problems encountered. The third part, do's and don'ts. When you should tell your patient not to exercise. When you should tell the patient not to exercise is whenever patient is complaining of a shortness of breath, with even minimal exertion or even at rest. It's a grade 4 dyspnea. Its oxygen saturations have really fallen down. Your exercises, your prescription of exercises will definitely worsen the situation. So please stop prescribing exercises at that time. When the patient complains of bone pain or any other pain which is not relieving by any modality or any medication, do not try to give exercises to such patients. Please wait and watch. It's a wait and watch situation. Wait for the pain to relieve. Wait for your oncologist to give you instructions whether to go ahead with the is when the patient is extremely fatigued. This can be done. This can be assessed by using any fatigue scale, or when patient himself or herself says, I'm not able to, please do not give me any exercises. I'm not even able to get up. That is a sign for you to please stop the exercises. Definitely dizziness and nausea. These are some of the side effects, toxic effects of chemotherapy. So stop or do not give exercises when patient is complaining shortness of breath, patient is complaining of unrelieved bone pain or any other pain in the body, patient is complaining of extreme fatigue, or patient is complaining of dizziness or nausea. These are stop indications for you not to give exercises. Coming to the next slide, exercises safety. whenever you are prescribing exercise, at any level, whether it is at a community level, whether it is at your OPD level, or it is at your acute level in the hospital ward stage, what is most important is you need to consider the safety of the patient and their caregivers. No, when I say safety, if patient is very obese and you're trying to make the patient walk with no assistance, definitely it's a dangerous situation. If patient is a patient of a 75-year-old or a 65-year-old, and you're trying to make the patient walk without any assistance, that is a danger sign. So please consider the safety of the patient before you try to work on the exercise prescription. You need to consider the environment as well, the external environment at the community, at home, at your OPD or at ward. These are the external environment, what you need to, the barriers, what the patient can encounter, and the internal is the systemic environment, the mental component of the patient, the emotional component of the patient, the will of the patient to do the exercise. If the patient doesn't want to do the exercise, this is again a red flag for you. Please do not force any patient to do an exercise, especially if you are working with a cancer patient. Need to consider specific precautions and contraindications as per the environment. Or whether you're working with cancer cachexia, or whether you're working with osteoporosis, remember, you need to make the patient sure that patient is in safe hands. And that is why I put the picture. Make the patient, he should have a lot of confidence in you, and you ensure that the patient is in safe hands before you prescribe the patient an exercise. Extremely important, if you get to see, or if your patient comes with new pains which was not there previously, new complaints which were not there previously, patient is also not sure whether it is because of that. And if there are any questions that is arising in your mind or in your client's mind, so the new pains, the new complaints, when you are not sure, or you have, a question in your mind, kindly go back to your oncologist and ask why. Do not hesitate. Tell your patient not to hesitate, and you yourself do not hesitate to ask a question or inform the oncology team, because if the team is not informed, they will not know how to help your patient out. So kindly refer back to suppose the patient is coming to you for 3 weeks or 4 weeks to your OPD, and she develops a new pain, a new complaint, which you are not very much confident on treating. Kindly take the patient to the oncologist, discuss the case, and then go ahead with the treatment. This is very important when a patient is especially on a radiation therapy or a chemotherapy or a targeted therapy. Yes, coming to the last slide of my presentation, early detection is a blessing, which means breast cancer can be treated and you have the chance to live a healthy life post-recovery. Very important message to be given to most of the cancer survivors, and where you are giving, where you're giving awareness programs, prevention programs, please get yourself detected by mammograms or split breast examination. And even if it is at stage 1 or 2, it means that it can be treated and patient has a chance to live a healthy life post-recovery. That's all I have for you today. Before I sign out, I would like to thank our wonderful hosts for giving me a chance to give a talk on this platform. Secondly, I'm extremely sorry for the technical issues that occurred. It's always there whenever we are on these platforms. So sorry for that. And I'm open for the questions. If anybody has a question to ask, I'm ready to answer. You people, anybody who is interested in the course, we run MPT 2-year course on in our college. And I'm very proud to tell that our college is the first one in India to run an MPT course of oncology for 2 years. It is not anywhere in the world. Of course, there are other institutes which have started. clinical trials. A lot of my students are doing a very good job with their research programs and presentations. Anybody interested can always contact me. They can mail me and ask. I'll be readily there to help you out. You can contact me for the reference list I have taken for my presentation as well. Yes, Ashwini, if I may ask anybody, you.
Hello, this is Dr. Vaibhavi Mainde. Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful session. And now I can see many of the questions from the participants. So now I'll start with the question answer session. The first question which we have is, what are the modalities that we can use to treat the patients,
I'm
what
sorry.
precautions to be
I'm
taken
sorry. I'm not.
based on what
I'm
stage
not
cancer
able
the patient has?
Yes.
Ma'am, can you hear me now?
There is disturbance, but yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. So the first question is, what are the modalities that we can use to treat the patients, and what precautions to be taken based on what stage of cancer the patient has?
Thank you for that question. It's a very important one when we are using most of the electrical modalities in literature, and what we have studied is a red flag. But we in our clinical setup, we are very commonly using, very routinely using TENS, both, what you say, high TENS and low TENS. We do not use burst TENS because that may be not very pleasant for the patient. As I said in my presentation, interferential currents have also been used, and they also have shown good results. Laser, cold laser, I said, we have not used for pain, but we have used for healing decubitus ulcer for a patient who was suffering from stage 4 cancer. And along with that, matrix therapy is something which is very new in our country, and it was for the first time that we used it. Am I audible?
Ma'am, your voice is interrupting.
Yeah, the precautions to be taken when you are using electrical modality. One, the patient willing to take, because we need to take consent for these patients, because the sensitivity of the skin is very important. Because chemotherapy induced skin changes are seen very commonly. There can be blackening of the skin, there can be reddening of the skin. So the sensitivity of the skin has to be studied. The sensations have to be checked before we use the electrical modalities. Definitely, if you are using lymphedema, you need to be very cautious of using electrical modalities.
Okay. Ma'am, the next question is, breast scan or mammography, which one should be recommended for young women?
What is it?
Am I audible, ma'am? Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Breast scan or mammography, which one should be recommended for young women?
Mammography is definitely the best screening tool in the world today. You know, mammography after the age of 40, I told you that is the best screening tool. But then in the community, you cannot tell everybody to have a mammography done, because it has its own cost as well. So self breast examination as a preventive and as an education method Yes, hello.
Hello, ma'am. Now, hello. Am
Yeah,
I
yeah.
audible, ma'am?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
So, yes, we'll move to the next question. That is, what is mammography and why it is so important?
No, I'm not getting you.
Ma'am, the question is, what is mammography and why it is important?
Mammography is a radiographic procedure where the patient's breasts are placed in between the two screening plates, and image is taken. It is pressed in between the two plates, and an image is taken to see whether there are cysts or whether there are fibrous tissues present in the dense layers of the breast. Why it is important? This is the best screening tool, a non-invasive technique wherein you can find out a fibrous cyst or a small fibrous tissue as small as 0.5 centimeters. So it is a very useful imaging technique. And after a mammography, if a patient has this, patient definitely can be sent for a biopsy, an MRI first, and then a biopsy MRI to see where exactly the fibrous tissue is, and then a biopsy can be taken. So it's a wonderful imaging technique. It's a very useful imaging technique, and non-invasive technique. Patient just has to go to a radiologist, or an oncologist or a gynecologist, and just get a prescription of a mammogram and get it done, and you get a report as fast as 6 hours. It's very fast, not even 6 hours. In just 1 hour, you get to know.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Now I request Dr. Antara to proceed for the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Vaibhavi. It was an enlightening question and answer session. First of all, I would like to thankful to our honorable speaker, Renu ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for illuminating us with your knowledge and experience. Thank you. I extend my sincerely thanks to Honorable National Head, Dr. Ruchi ma'am, for this venture of upliftment of our field. I extend my sincere thanks to Honorable National Head Dr. Ruchi ma'am for this venture for upliftment of our field. I would love to extend sincere thanks to Dr. Suvarna Garvin ma'am and the entire Maharashtra state team of IAP Women Cell for their constant guidance, which has actually made this session a success. And most important, I would like to thank you all the participants in particular, because no event is possible or a successful without active participations. We had a fantastic and responsive audience today. I would like to thank you, IAP India technical team, for technical and each and every person who directly and indirectly contributed for this webinar. Without you all, this wouldn't have been possible. Thank you once again, and please do share your feedback with us by filling the online feedback form. The online feedback forms are available in your chat box as well as in WhatsApp group. Thank you.